Hello, and welcome to the LightShine Devotionals. I'd like to introduce you today to Lydia, a Gentile woman in the New Testament. Gentile simply means she wasn't Jewish. Either you were Jewish or you were not, and if you were not, you were called a Gentile. She became one of the first converts to Christianity. Now you might think that 16 chapters in, there might have been some other converts. But what we're saying about here is that she was the first European convert. Luke is writing his account for us, and so we'll just read what he had to say of what went on that day. On the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my house." And she prevailed upon us. Lydia, this was not a woman who was identified by whose mother she was or whose wife she was. She wasn't Lydia, Dave's mom. She wasn't John's wife or Sally's mom. No, she was identified by what she did. A businesswoman, a dealer of expensive purple fabric. Lydia was highlighted out of all the other women that were there that day, possibly because of her social status, but more likely because of what she came to mean to the young church in that area thereafter. There was no synagogue in town, so these seekers of God, who would have been Jewish proselytes, gathered and prayed together on a sunny bank down by the river. They were actually going against the norm of the culture there in Philippi, because in Philippi, interestingly enough, there was a rule against new religions. Lydia was intent and hungry to know God and follow God above all else. So even with all the things that Lydia had to do, and you know she did, she had to keep her household running. She had to keep that business running. But she didn't allow those things, or even her status in life, being a rich woman, presumably, with purple fabric. Well, she didn't let those things impede her desire for the things of God, did she? No. That particular day that Luke is talking about was out of the ordinary for the women, obviously. Paul spoke, and she heard with her ears, and God spoke, and she heard with her heart. What changed Lydia's life was the Holy Spirit's illumination of the work that God had already been doing in her. Her heart had been prepared for this very moment. Without hesitation, her life changed. This was the completion of the the salvation journey that God was calling her on. Some of us were saved quickly and in an instant and dramatically, and some of us walked for a while in that pre-cross situation, so that at a certain point we came and knew and called him God, bowed our knee. And that's where she was. So these were the events that day just outside of Philippi, the story of Lydia, the seller of purple. With her conversion to Christianity, God opened the door for the gospel in that whole region. She started with those closest to her, as you might expect. We see that immediately after her conversion, she shared what she had learned and was instrumental in the conversion of her entire family and household. We don't know how many people that might have entailed. They don't tell us. But as a wealthy woman, and she probably had household help, and so we find all that information in verse 15 of the text. She she was also imbued with spiritual gifts, as we all are. And she had a deep spiritual sense that the close fellowship of believers was paramount to the life of the new work that was beginning in her city. She was part of that. So as a result of her wisdom and insight, she proved to be instrumental in providing the invitation and the location for the new believers gathering. Over time, a house fellowship began to blossom there in her home. The church in Philippi was nurtured under her care. And we can see the diligent work that she put into that. We can see the results of that in looking at the letter of Paul to the Philippian church. He didn't write to the Philippian church in response to a crisis, as he did to so many, like the Galatians, the Corinthians, the Colossians. No, Paul's joy at the mere thought of the Philippian church is woven through the whole book. It's a book of encouragement. It's the undeniable tone of the whole letter. He wrote from jail, mind you, to express his appreciation. They had sent him a gift, and to express his affection for the Philippian believers. The legacy of the church at Philippi can be attributed in part to the ministry of Lydia. Her influence of living a passionate life on fire for him set a tone in the church as part of its very foundation, as part of its very bones that carried for years to come. Lydia is an example for Christians everywhere. Now, these have been some very difficult months for all of us with the plague and all. But it's a good time for us to really steady ourselves in the Holy Spirit's light and evaluate our orientation, our mindset. We can certainly recognize that we have blessings abundant and so much to be thankful for. But the pace and the pressures of life can definitely misalign our focus and rob us of our glow. Like Lydia, with God's guidance, centered in daily prayer, exercising our God-given gifts, in fellowship with other believers, we can live a holy, passionate life on fire for Him, living in His ways. Because of Lydia, we can be women who shine where we are. Until tomorrow, I'm Mindy Burns with the LightShine Devotionals.